Have you ever dreamed about someone healing you, and then woken up feeling something inexplicably different, as if a pain had disappeared or a deep anguish had been relieved from one moment to the next? What if I told you that there are people in the world who claim, in no uncertain terms, to have been saved by angels while they were sleeping? Stories that not only defy logic, but leave even the most skeptical with a lump in their throat. Ordinary people, like you and me, who have been touched by mysterious presences at their most vulnerable moments during sleep. And we are not talking about vague or symbolic dreams, but about intense encounters, full of details where beings of light appear, touch, heal, and disappear. Science tries to explain it with technical terms such as brain activity, unconscious, archetypes, altered states of consciousness, but there is something in these reports that escapes any diagnosis, an invisible force, a supernatural energy, or as many believe, an angelic intervention. The so-called healing angels have been manifesting in dreams for centuries, in different cultures, religions, and places around the world. And the most curious thing? The descriptions are eerily similar. Luminous figures, a feeling of immediate peace, words that are not spoken with the mouth but understood by the soul. And a healing that happens so quickly that not even doctors can explain it. Is it coincidence, imagination? Or are we talking about clear divine signs sent to remind us that angels exist and they continue to protect us? Many people keep these experiences a secret for fear of being called crazy. Maybe you yourself have already experienced something like this, a dream that left a deep impression on you, but that you never had the courage to tell anyone about. Or maybe you woke up with tears in your eyes and a feeling of having been visited by something or someone, something pure, something greater. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover may surprise you, and maybe even reopen that little box of memories you've kept hidden inside your heart. Let's explore together 3 true stories, moving and inexplicable stories of people who were healed while they slept. Stories where the angels appeared in dreams, touched the body and soul, and left behind not only healing, but also a silent call to faith. You will hear the story of a feverish child who had a dream about a man of light and woke up completely healthy, of a terminally ill elderly man who saw a winged woman touch his chest in a dream and surprised the doctors days later, and of a mother who, guided by an angel in a dream, saved her son's life at the right time. None of these stories have a scientific explanation, but they all carry something that you will feel, and perhaps as you hear each word you remember a dream, a feeling or a moment that also didn't make sense until now. Because it could be that the angels have also spoken to you, and you just didn't realize it. Now take a deep breath, prepare your heart, because the first story begins now, because maybe the angels have also spoken to you, and you just didn't realize it. By the way, if at any point in your life you have felt that you were protected by something greater, or had a dream so real that it seemed more like a visit than an illusion, tell me here in the comments. Seriously, this space is a safe place where we share, listen, and connect through stories that touch the soul. Sometimes your story may be exactly what someone else needs to read today to understand that she is not alone. And if this type of content makes sense to you, if it moves you or helps you look at life with more faith, leave a like. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it makes all the difference. When you like, comment, and subscribe, YouTube understands that this subject is important and shows the video to more people who, like you, are looking for answers, comfort, or just a spark of hope. Your participation here is what sustains this channel. It is what keeps this energy flowing. And if you want to continue receiving stories like this, full of mystery, faith, and spiritual connections, sign up now and activate the bell. This is how you help me to continue bringing these narratives that often science cannot explain, but that the heart understands perfectly. Now, take another deep breath and get ready, because the first story is hair-raising, and it could change the way you see your own dreams. And that's why today we're going to delve into stories that aren't just exciting. They're stories that have the power to transform the way you see the spiritual world. These are experiences so real to those who lived them that they leave even The most skeptical in silence. 3 stories of ordinary people who, while they were sleeping, received something extraordinary: healing, guidance, and a kind of love that cannot be put into words. And the most intriguing thing, all of this happened through the appearance of angel-seen dreams. These are not vague visions or poetic metaphors. We are talking about clear, direct, almost palpable interventions. Beings of light who appeared in moments of despair, when medicine no longer provided answers, when the pain seemed unbearable, or when life hung by a thread. These presences not only touched the body, but also the soul. And the impact was so profound that it completely changed the course of those journeys. You can't hear these stories and continue seeing reality in the same way. The first story comes from a single mother named Leticia. She was going through a period of intense emotional and physical exhaustion. Her son, who was only 7 years old, had been hospitalized with a serious infection, and the doctors were unable to stabilize his condition. After days of despair and sleepless nights, Leticia finally fell asleep sitting in a hospital chair. She dreamed of a tall figure, enveloped in a soft glow, no defined face but with a presence that conveyed absolute security. The figure touched the boy's chest and said, without moving its lips, "He'll breathe on his own tomorrow." Leticia woke up with her heart racing. The next day, the tests showed a sudden and inexplicable improvement in the boy's condition. The medical team was stunned. This was simply not expected. This story is not isolated. Cases like this multiply throughout the world, in different cultures, beliefs, and languages. But there is something in common in all of them. The moment of the dream seems to be a kind of sacred frequency, where the spiritual crosses the veil of the physical. And that is when the angels act. Silently, without asking for anything in return. They simply appear, touch, and leave behind a mark that no imaging test can capture, but that those who have experienced it will never forget. The second story involves a man named Samuel, 63 years old. He was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer and was given a prognosis that he had only a few months to live. He was at home, already exhausted, preparing to leave. One morning he had a vivid dream. He was in a forest, surrounded by tall trees, and a very clear sky. A woman with silver wings was walking toward him. She placed her hand on his abdomen and whispered, "It is not your time yet, come back." When he woke up, he felt so light that for a moment he thought he had already left. Days later, routine exams showed that the tumor had shrunk. The foul. Doctors ran the tests again. The answer was unanimous. There is no plausible explanation for such a rapid regression. The most impressive thing about these cases is how the message received in a dream comes not only in words, but with deep sensations. It is as if the heart understands something that the mind has not yet reached. The presence of angels in these stories is accompanied by an inner certainty, a state of peace so intense that people wake up changed, even if they cannot explain. Why, these stories remind us that there is a parallel reality to what we see with our eyes, a dimension where the invisible acts with full force, and where faith is not just an abstract belief, but a living force that shapes concrete results. Sometimes divine intervention happens when we need it most, and when we least expect it. Science calls this spontaneous remission. Spirituality calls it a miracle. I like to think it is a gentle reminder from heaven that we are not alone, and if all this seemed surprising until now, the third story will give you goosebumps. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because beyond the physical healing, there is something even more transformative happening in these encounters. It is as if the very destiny of these people has been redirected from that moment of contact, as if there was a hidden truth behind every dream, revealed only to those willing to see with the eyes of the soul. Every detail of these experiences carries hidden messages. Symbols, emotions, sensations, everything matters, and the curious thing is that when analyzing these stories side by side, a pattern begins to emerge. It is as if the angels leave similar traces wherever they go. This repetition is no coincidence. It is spiritual language. Maybe you've already felt something similar. An unexplainable presence during your sleep, an image that won't leave your head, or a healing that no one has been able to explain. Write here in the comments, "I'm on this journey too. I really want to know if this resonated with you too. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because to understand the real impact of these stories, we need to look more closely at what they actually are. Angels in dreams. What is behind these vivid apparitions, these presences that arise at the most vulnerable moment of the human being? Sleep. It is not new to believe that dreams are more than just echoes of our unconscious. In many ancient traditions, they are considered true spiritual portals, windows through which the invisible world communicates with the visible. The Egyptians, for example, saw dreams as sacred messages sent by the gods. In the Bible, we see several passages where God speaks to prophets during sleep. Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, was warned by an angel in a dream to flee with Mary and protect the boy. And this is not an isolated incident. Dreams have always been the scene of divine revelations. Within Christianity, there are countless accounts of saints and mystics who were guided or healed through dreams. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote about angelic visions that only came to her when she was in a deep sleep, as if her spirit needed to be free from the weight of her body to receive them. Saint John Bosco, founder of the Salesian order, had his entire life marked by prophetic dreams, many of which involved angels instructing him in important decisions. And the curious thing is that these accounts do not only appear in the religious field. Mediums, spiritualists, and even scholars of the invisible world, from different cultures, describe the same pattern. Angels appear when consciousness is relaxed, when the mind is quiet and the heart is more receptive. And why does this happen in dreams? Because it is in this state that logic breaks down and the spiritual has free passage. During sleep, especially in the deeper stages, such as REM, the brain enters a different state. Brain waves slow down, the body becomes paralyzed, and the mind begins to operate at a more subtle frequency. It's as if we left the material, plain for a moment and touched, even if only for a moment, another reality. Science tries to explain this phenomenon. Psychology speaks of dreams as symbolic manifestations of the unconscious. Freud saw dreams as repressed desires disguised as dream stories. Jung went further. He believed that dreams connect the individual to the collective unconscious, a kind of universal memory. And interestingly, it was he who came closest to the spiritual idea, admitting that certain images in dreams seemed to come from a source that went far beyond the individual psyche. Still, there is something that psychology can't touch: the real impact of these experiences on people's lives. When someone dreams of an angel and wakes up with their heart racing, with tears in their eyes, with their body light as if they had been touched by a divine presence, it's not just symbolism, it is a spiritual experience. And even those who study human behavior end up recognizing that there are dreams that simply cannot be explained. Cases where the content of the dream anticipates events, reveals cures, or completely transforms someone's mentality in a single night. These dreams about angels are not random. They come loaded with messages on purpose. Sometimes the angel says nothing. He just appears, looks into your eyes, touches you lightly with his fingertips. But the dreamer feels something change inside. A deep peace. An answer that previously seemed impossible. A courage that springs from nowhere, as if it were not just a dream. Butan appointment with the divine. In some mystical traditions, it is believed that angels visit us when an important decision needs to be made, when there is a fork in the road, or when suffering has become so intense that only spiritual intervention can open another path. They do not appear to impress. They are not like in the movies with big golden wings and background music. Sometimes they are simple, human, with an ordinary appearance, but the feeling they leave, that is unmistakable, and there is a reason for that. The spiritual world does not care about form. It cares about function. The angel can come in the image of a deceased grandfather, of a child, of a light that speaks from within. And yet, his presence has the same weight: healing, comfort, direction. It's as if each of these dreams were a carefully delivered message at the exact moment when the soul needs it most. And perhaps the most beautiful thing is to realize that this does not depend on religion. There is no need to follow a dogma, wear a symbol, say a specific prayer. What opens the channel is the interior layout. It is the sincere heart. It is the silent cry of the soul that even without words asks for help. And when this happens, heaven listens. Angels in dreams are the answer. They are part of a larger communication that connects the visible to the invisible, the rational to the spiritual, time to the eternal. And even when science tries to reduce everything to electrical impulses in the brain, there is a point where the mystery begins. And that is where these stories live. Comment here. That makes sense to me, just so I know that you also feel that there is something bigger behind all this. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because as much as we talk about spirituality, science, angels and dreams, nothing has as much impact as a real story. And it's not just a pretty story. It's one of those experiences that changes the way you see everything, including the fine line between what is explained and what remains a mystery. It was a sultry summer night when it all happened. A girl of just 6 years old was at home, lying on an old wooden bed with sheets damp from sweat. The fever was so high that I could barely open my eyes. His breathing was short, his eyes were red, and his entire body seemed to be burning as if it were on fire from within. The parents, already exhausted, had spent the entire day praying, drinking homemade teas, and making unsuccessful attempts to lower the temperature with cold compresses. The thermometer had already read 41 degrees, and the worst part, the fever did not subside with any medicine. The doctors had been clear that afternoon. Get ready, because if that fever doesn't go down by dawn, the risk is real. She fell asleep amidst the turmoil. Her mother, sitting beside the bed, held her warm little hand and murmured soft prayers, almost without strength. Outside, the sound of crickets and a warm wind lulled that tense dawn, and it was at that moment that the dream began. In the dream, the girl saw herself in a very bright field. There was no blue sky or visible ground, but a light that seemed to come from all sides, as if the air itself were shining. She was standing, but she didn't know how. The body is light, the mind is calm. I felt no pain, no heat, no fear, and in front of him a figure appeared. He didn't come walking. It just appeared. A tall man wearing a white robe who moved as if he was floating even without wind. The wings were golden, but not golden like metal. It was a glow that seemed to come from within him, a bright, warm, welcoming gold. The face was serene, and the eyes seemed to contain all the answers in the world, a look that crossed time, doubts and despair. He didn't say anything. He just slowly walked over and held out his hand. The girl stood still, mesmerized, as he touched her forehead with his fingertips. It was a soft touch, almost imperceptible. But in that instant, she felt something change. It was as if a wave of peace spread from within. The heat of the fever dissolved. Fear is gone. And she felt whole, not like someone sick who needed healing, but like someone who had been reminded that she was protected. The dream ended there. She opened her eyes with the room still in darkness and whispered to her mother. The man of light touched my forehead. The mother thought it was delirium, confusion caused by the high fever. But when she put her hand on her daughter's forehead, she felt something inexplicable. Her skin was cold. The sweat had dried, and her body, which had been feverish, was calm. The thermometer confirmed what seemed impossible. 36 degrees. Normal. Completely normal. At the hospital, the doctors looked at each other in silence. There is no medical explanation that justifies such a rapid recovery, one of them said. Another, more skeptical, mumbled something about children healing themselves and having an unexpectedly strong immune system. But no one could explain why, in less than an hour, a life-threatening fever had disappeared as if it had never been there. What left a mark on that family was not only the physical healing, but the impact of the experience. The girl was no longer the same. Over time, he began to draw that man of light repeatedly, always with golden wings and calm eyes. She said he still visited her in her dreams from time to time, but now only to smile and remind her that she was not alone. And as much as many people tried to find a logical explanation for that, the truth is that not everything can, or should, be measured by scientific rulers. There are times when mystery is what sustains the beauty of the experience. that which is inexplicable but transformative. This story is not unique. There are thousands of similar stories all over the world, silent, stories kept deep inside people, often hidden for fear of judgment or disbelief. But when someone finally decides to share, other voices are raised. This happened to me too. I saw a similar light. I felt that presence. It's like there's a spiritual frame where these experiences connect. And as we make room for them, our mindset changes. We stop seeing dreams as just a nighttime activity of the brain and start perceiving them as part of the journey, as important scenes in a larger script, written not just with neurons, but with intuitions, emotions, and yes, revelations. Perhaps the most touching thing is to understand that even when everything seems lost, even when the body is on the verge of collapse and the mind can no longer take it, the spirit remains available. And in this sacred space, angels move. Not for vanity or spectacle, but for love. A silent, wordless love that simply acts, play, cure, and transforms everything. Write in the comments, I'm on this journey too, if you feel that these stories also awaken something within you. And it's precisely at this point in the journey that many people begin to feel something different, as if there were a presence accompanying every step, even on days when everything seems too quiet. Because it's not just about faith or believing in angels in the traditional sense, it's about recognizing that there are signs, subtle touches, moments when something greater is trying to guide us, even when we don't immediately realize. Feel if everything we've talked about so far has awakened something in you, a curiosity, a desire to better understand these signs, or even that desire to know if there is an angel designated just to accompany you, then perhaps it makes sense to take a look at the material I've left below. It is something practical, direct, and made especially for those who feel they are on this journey of awakening and connection. The name is Reading Your Birth Angel, and he can help you connect with personalized guidance from the angelic kingdom in a clear, accessible way that can really make a difference in how you go through your phases of transformation. This material is complementary to what we talked about here and can save you a lot of time in practice, because instead of trying to interpret everything on your own, you already have a clearer direction. It's here in the description, but I might take it down in the next few days, because it's something I'm testing for now. So if it's useful to you, take advantage of it while it's still available. Now I want to continue and take you through another, even deeper layer of this conversation. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because after hearing stories like the one about the child and the man of light, there's no way. We can't stop for a moment and ask ourselves, are there really presences watching us while we sleep? Are there entities designed to protect us, guide us, or even heal us silently when everything is calm on the outside, but inside the soul is crying out for help? This reflection stirs something ancient within us, a place where logic gives way to mystery, where control gives way to surrender, where the restless mind begins, little by little, to silence itself, only to hear something more subtle, more refined, more profound. Some say that dreams are just electrical discharges from the brain, that they are the result of mental activity, trying to organize the thoughts of the day. But what if from time to time they are much more than that? What if they are meetings? What if they are visits? What if there is someone or something watching us with a care that we cannot even imagine? Not to judge but to protect, to align our spirit when it strays from the path, to deliver a silent strength that we only notice when we wake up different, with a lighter chest, as if we had been embraced by something invisible. You can't measure this with a laboratory ruler, but it can't be ignored either, especially when intuition speaks louder. When something inside us whispers that there is, yes, an order that goes beyond the apparent chaos, that there is purpose behind every dark night, that nothing happens by chance, not even that strange dream that we insist on forgetting, but that keeps haunting our memory with a feeling that we can't explain. How many times have you woken up feeling like you've just had a conversation with someone, with a sense of peace that doesn't match what you were experiencing before you went to sleep, or even with a warning, a direction that completely changed the course of things in the following days? It's as if there were a silent backstage, where our soul is visited by answers that we cannot hear when we are awake, trapped in the distractions of everyday life. And perhaps in these moments our spirit is more available, lighter, less conditioned by the bonds of ego and reason. And here comes something that many people ignore, the subtlety with which the divine manifests itself. We wait for the noisy miracle, the light exploding in the sky, the screaming sign, but often the touch comes in the form of a breath, a symbolic image, an unknown face that transmits immense peace. A scenario that makes no sense, but carries a feeling of healing, and above all the presence, the feeling that you were not alone that night. This kind of perception doesn't need to be explained in words. It is felt, it is experienced, and the more we make room for it, the more we begin to notice patterns, repetitions, little codes being delivered there in the darkness of the room when all we have left is to close our eyes and trust. Therefore, this question, are there presences watching us while we sleep, is not to be answered in a hurry. It needs to be felt. It needs to mature within us, because the answer may already be there between the lines of your own story. On the times when you got out of an inexplicable situation without understanding how. On the nights when you cried alone and suddenly were overcome by a calm for no reason, or even on that day when everything seemed lost, and an invisible force kept you from giving up. It's easy to doubt when we only look at the world with our physical eyes, but when we begin to realize that there are invisible layers that touch us without asking permission, then the journey changes, perception changes, and we start to walk differently, choosing differently, making decisions more wisely, because you feel like there is something else looking out for you. This hidden truth that perhaps we are never completely alone transforms the way we relate to life, with our dilemmas, with the cycles of pain and healing, and mainly with silence, because silence also speaks, and sometimes he speaks loudly. So the next time you lay your head on the pillow, it might be worth asking yourself, what if tonight is one of those nights where the sky bends down to touch me somehow? You may not see a man of light with golden wings, but you may feel a presence, a sign, a subtle embrace in the spirit, and that in itself may already be the beginning of a new stage in your journey. Write in the comments, I'm on this journey too, just so I know that you felt this calling inside, because now we are going to go through another layer of this truth. Because when we talk about these silent presences that approach during the night, there is something that moves us in a very intimate place, a place that goes beyond belief. It's almost like an instinctive recognition that there is something beyond matter, beyond time, beyond pain. And it is at this point that the story I'm going to tell you now takes on an even more impactful dimension. Imagine an elderly, frail man heading towards the final stretch of his life with a terminal diagnosis. The doctors were clear. It was an advanced, aggressive tumor, and there wasn't much that could be done. The devastated family was torn between trying to maintain hope and the burden of accepting reality. Hospital visits no longer involved words, just looks. His room already smelled of farewell. But on one of those nights when the silence seems to weigh more than the illness itself, something different happened. He dreamed of a woman, but she was no ordinary woman. He described her as someone with a serene presence, long hair, a calm face surrounded by a warm light and wings. Broad wings that did not flap but floated gently behind her. She did not speak. She simply looked into his eyes, smiled with a tenderness that dispelled any fear, and placed her hands on his chest, right where the tumor was. He woke up with tears in his eyes. He said he felt no pain, that there was a different peace in the G. Here it wasn't euphoria, it wasn't a shouted miracle. It was silence, but a living silence. He cried as he told his daughter what had happened and said, "It was like I was at peace for the first time." The daughter reported that she had never seen her father so calm. For the first time in months, he ate with appetite. He made fun of the nurse. He slept soundly the next few nights, but what came next was even more disconcerting. Days later, during routine exams, doctors found something they couldn't explain. The tumor mass had regressed, spontaneously, without any new treatment. Blood levels were stabilized, and vital signs had improved significantly. Health professionals tried to find technical reasons, reassessed the diagnosis, and discussed possibilities in clinical meetings, but no one could offer a clear answer. The only explanation the old man gave was this: "She came, she touched me, and since then I've been different." The most curious thing is that the change wasn't just in his body, it was in his presence, in his gaze. Even his children, accustomed to seeing him as a grumpy man, began to notice a different glow. He was more affectionate, he spoke of forgiveness, he wanted to resume old conversations, and, even without knowing how much time he had left, it seemed that he was no longer living in a hurry or in fear. This story changes the way we see reality, because it exposes a hidden truth. Not everything that matters can be measured. Not all healing comes through medication, and not every miracle comes with a spectacle. Sometimes what heals is presence, the touch, the vibration, that which acts in a field that science has not yet named, but which the soul immediately recognizes. And there's something powerful about that, because when someone is on the brink of death and finds peace, it's not just about accepting death. Sometimes it's about being reborn from within, even if the body is falling apart. It's about releasing the weight that's been carried for years. It's about freeing yourself from guilt, hurt, fear, and making room for something bigger. Something that may have always been there, waiting for a gesture of surrender. The truth is that there are decisions we need to make before the end comes. Decisions about how we want to live, with what kind of mentality, with what level of connection. And stories like this remind us that the invisible is more present than we imagine. That there are people working behind the scenes all the time, even if we don't see them. This winged woman could be a symbol, a spiritual manifestation, or the reflection of a silent request. It doesn't matter what name you give her. What matters is the impact, the effect, the transformation that takes place after she appears. And if this happened to him, why couldn't it happen to us too? Have you ever had a similar moment but couldn't name it? A moment when you felt you weren't alone, even though you were in the dark. An inexplicable feeling of comfort, protection, or sudden clarity. Sometimes the answer is closer than it seems. You just have to pay attention to the details. And even if you have never experienced something like this so clearly, the simple fact of being open to it already begins to change everything. Because when the mind opens up space, the spirit begins to listen. And then the invisible moves. Comment here. That makes sense to me, just so I know that this kind of truth also reverberates inside you. Because now I want to take you even deeper into this journey. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because as much as these experiences move us and touch something essential within us, there is always a question that comes back to the surface. Almost like an automatic reflex of reason. What does science say about this? Is there any plausible, measurable, rational explanation for these encounters with the invisible? The first attempt at an answer usually comes from psychology. Many experts point to the so-called placebo effect, a real and physiological response of the body to symbolic stimuli. When someone deeply believes that they are being cared for, supported or cured, the body itself can begin to react. This is a proven fact. The brain releases substances such as endorphins, dopamine, and even immune modulators, which directly influence the feeling of well-being and even recovery processes. It's not magic, it's biology. But that's not all, because even the most skeptical scholars admit there are cases that go beyond any margin of explanation, cases where the result goes beyond what the placebo could cause, cases where the emotional and physical impact is so profound and sudden it seems to defy all statistics. And that's where a field comes in where science for now can only observe, but not control. The subconscious mind also comes into play. Research shows that dreams play a powerful role in emotional processing, healing trauma, and reorganizing the psyche. Jung spoke of archetypes, universal images that emerge from the collective unconscious. He believed that these figures, such as winged beings, lights, and protective entities, are not mere individual creations, but deep expressions of the human soul that span cultures, eras, and religions. In other words, when someone dreams of an angel or a winged woman, they may be accessing something that we all carry on some level, even without knowing it. a fascinating study conducted by psychologist David Saunders of the University of North Carolina analyzed reports from more than 800 terminally ill patients who experienced vivid dreams of luminous figures, many of them feminine, welcoming, and enveloped in light. The most curious fact: most of these patients did not share the same religion or culture, but the symbolic patterns were incredibly similar. Beings of peace, silent presence, touch on the chest or back, a feeling of lightness. And in many of these reports, there was regression of pain, improvement in emotional state, and in some cases, like the man in the previous story, even unexpected physical changes. And then the question arises even more forcefully. If these experiences were just random projections of the mind, why do so many accounts follow the same pattern? Why do different cultures with different beliefs describe such similar presences in moments of crisis, of transition, of transformation? Perhaps there is a hidden truth there that we are only beginning to glimpse, and perhaps science is slowly learning that mystery is not a threat to knowledge, but a door, an invitation. Because the human inner world is as vast as the universe outside, and the boundary between faith and reason is often just a thin line drawn by fear. Fear of admitting that not everything can be controlled, explained, tamed, but look how curious it is. While some people use science as a wall, others use it as a bridge. There are doctors, nurses, and psychologists who, after years of caring for terminally ill patients, have begun to notice an invisible pattern at work there. It's not about religion. It's about something bigger, a silent force that seems to arrive when the pain reaches its limit and the soul no longer has any defenses. And at that moment something opens, a portal, a listening, a surrender. Maybe that's why so many reports happen in the early hours of the morning, in the silence, when the body relaxes and the mind no longer fights, when everything is dark on the outside but some light begins to shine on the inside. A light that does not have an electrical origin, but an energetic one, spiritual, and it touches exactly where it hurts, where it's missing, where it's dried up. And even those who have never experienced anything like this can feel a calling, just by hearing these stories, because deep down we feel that there is something more, that we are not alone, and that from time to time life sends these signs, beings of light, vivid dreams, subtle touches, to remind us that there is indeed a way back, inward, to the essential, to what never dies. And when we talk about beings with wings, soft, light, words unspoken but deeply understood, the heart recognizes, not as a fable, but as a truth it was kept somewhere in ancestral memory, an ancient reminder that we were made for something greater, and that, even in chaos, there is order. Even in pain there is redemption, and even at the end there is a new beginning. Write it down. I'm on this journey too, just so I can feel that this search for meaning also pulses within you, because now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because despite all the rationality we can apply, there is something undeniable in the way these stories touch us, a connection that goes beyond the physical, that reverberates in the soul and defies logic. The story I am going to tell now is one of those cases that seem to be taken directly from behind the scenes of a hidden truth, an experience that transforms not only those who experience it, but everyone who hears it. It was a quiet night, the kind where the silence is almost palpable. A mother, an ordinary woman but with a keen sensitivity to the invisible, had a vivid dream, one of those that seemed too real to be just products of the mind. In this dream, she saw an angel, not a distant, abstract being, but a luminous, delicate presence with wings that seemed made of liquid light, almost tangible. The angel spoke, but not in conventional words. It was as if a soft voice echoed directly in her heart, telling her to go to her son's room because something was wrong. The mother woke up with her body filled with an urgent and strange sensation. The room was still dark, and the silence of that house that was usually a refuge now seemed threatening. She hesitated, but not for long. An invisible impulse guided her. When she entered the room, she found her son convulsing, his muscles rigid, and his breathing ragged. Thanks to that inexplicable intuition, or that visit from the angel in the dream, she acted quickly, calling for help and saving the boy's life. The impact of that moment reverberated not only in the life of that family, but in the entire community. That followed the story. The mother recounted with teary eyes how that winged figure enveloped in a warm white light seemed to be the only silent witness to all of it. "If I had ignored the dream, my son might not be here anymore," she said, and her words carried the weight of truth, a truth that is measured not in tests or diagnoses, but in decisions, in an instant that changed everything. This story leads us to a deep reflection on the nature of our reality and the dimensions that we may not yet fully understand. How often does the mind open up in moments of crisis, releasing an expanded perception, a kind of connection with something greater? Science tries to explain these phenomena through neurology, brain patterns during sleep, and the activity of the limbic system, responsible for emotions and the survival instinct. But the real question is, can science, no matter how advanced it may be, really map the most subtle layers of human consciousness? Or are we facing a frontier where faith, intuition, and reason walk side by side, even if they do not always agree? Modern psychology has been studying this interface with increasing interest. Some researchers point out that dreams like the one about the mother are not just the product of chance, but manifestations of a highly functional subconscious, a kind of internal warning system that protects us from imminent danger. In other words, the mind, even during sleep, can be attuned to physical and emotional signals that indicate a real threat, almost as if our body and spirit were working together behind the scenes in a silent dance between the conscious and the invisible. However, what is striking is not only the possibility of a neurological or psychological interpretation, but the emotional and transformative impact of these experiences. These are moments when life seems to reveal its deepest meaning, its internal protective mechanisms, its messages encoded in dreams and visions. And this happens at a moment of decision, when a mother chooses to believe in what she felt, even without tangible proof, even without complete scientific explanations. This choice is what separates what is just a story from a testimony of transformation, because deep down what we observe in these experiences is an invitation to change our mindset, an invitation to give up absolute control, to accept that there are invisible forces and influences that act in our lives, often without us realizing it. It is a call to trust our intuition, to value the messages that come from within, even when they seem disconnected from logic. When that mother decided to act, she not only saved her son's life, but also changed the course of the journey itself. It changed his perception of the world, of faith, of science, and of what we call reality. And this transformation reverberates in all of us, as it reminds us that our decisions, even the simplest ones, carry an immense power of impact. And that true knowledge is not only in the evidence, but also in the revelations we feel behind the scenes of consciousness. This makes us think about the complexity of what we call reality. How many other stories are there hidden, kept in the silence of the night, that tell of encounters like this? How many mothers, fathers, children, elderly people, strangers received a sign, an invisible visit, a dream full of meaning that changed their lives forever? These stories are proof that no matter how much we want to rationalize everything, there is still a pulsating mystery, a hidden truth waiting to be discovered, and above all, to be experienced. And that's where the journey gets even more intriguing, because these experiences challenge us to question our own beliefs and expand our minds beyond what seems possible. They invite us to rethink what it means to be alive, what it means to be present and attentive to the signs that arrive in unexpected ways. Life, after all, is made up of moments like these, moments of decision, choices that seem small but that carry the power to transform destiny. If this power exists, if these invisible forces really act behind the scenes, then understanding the connection between science and faith ceases to be a dilemma and becomes a bridge, a path where technical knowledge meets ancestral wisdom and where the heart has as strong a voice as reason. And so each story, each dream, each sign becomes an important piece of this puzzle that is our existence. Comment there. This makes sense to me, so that I can feel that this connection also pulses in you, just as it pulses in me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because when we look at these stories, at these experiences that transcend the ordinary, we realize that they are not just isolated reports. They are signs, echoes of a reality much greater than what our eyes can see. They are revelations that invite us to expand our mindset and the way we view life, the unknown, and the decisions we make at every moment. What these narratives show us, ultimately, is that our journey is not a solitary one. There is an invisible field of energy, a network of forces that act silently behind the scenes, influencing our existence and often guiding our steps even when we do not realize it. This hidden truth challenges skepticism and opens space for faith, not blind faith, but a conscious faith that recognizes the complexity of life and the presence of something greater. It is faith that awakens spiritual vigilance, that subtle attention that makes us perceive the signs that arrive, the details that may seem small but carry a gigantic impact. When we consider that, while we sleep, these forces work for us, operating in dimensions that science has not yet fully deciphered, we begin to understand that the universe is a field of continuous transformations. Our brain, our soul, and even our physical bodies are parts of this great mosaic in constant movement. It is as if reality were a stage where multiple layers of meaning unfold, where dreams are not mere random images, but coded messages that, if deciphered, can change the course of our lives. It is fascinating to think that this connection between science and spirituality, between mind and heart, between reason and intuition, is precisely what can bring us true transformation. A transformation that goes beyond what we see and hear, that touches the essence of who we are, and that prepares us to face adversity with more courage, with a broader vision of what it means to exist. Spiritual vigilance, then, ceases to be an abstract concept and becomes a daily practice. Being attentive, open, receptive to the messages that arrive, often in the form of dreams, premonitions, unexpected encounters. This realization brings hope that even when all seems lost, when darkness invades our days, there is a light working to protect and guide us. That perhaps we are not as alone as we think, that while we close our eyes to the outside world, an invisible network of care and love works around us, watching over our journey, inspiring our decisions, whispering truths that only the heart can hear. This is the essence of the impact of these stories. They remind us of the depth of human experience, of the importance of trusting not only in science and reason, but also in what we feel and experience internally. They reveal that true strength lies in the union between knowledge and faith, between the mind that seeks to understand and the spirit that knows how to feel. That real transformation happens when we allow these two sides to coexist and dialogue, building a solid foundation for life. And this message is especially powerful because it applies to all of us, at any stage of life or situation. Because in the end, what matters is not just surviving challenges, but growing from them, learning to recognize the signs, to value the invisible connections that shape our destiny. This is what gives us the courage to continue, what strengthens our hope and what lights the way, even in the darkest moments. So as we reflect on all this, we become more aware of the role we play in this great cosmic game. We understand that every decision, no matter how small, has the power to change the course of our story, that the care we take with our thoughts, our emotions, and our faith can open doors to experiences that defy logic and reveal the extraordinary, hidden in the everyday. And it is precisely this understanding that prepares us for the next stages of the journey, to look more closely at the little things, at the details that may seem insignificant, but that carry profound truths. To welcome the experiences that come to us unexpectedly, to recognize that often the answers we seek are there, between the lines of our consciousness, waiting to be discovered. Comment, "I'm on this journey too," so that we know that this search for meaning and connection is something that pulses in many people, uniting our stories and creating a living network of transformation. Have you ever had a dream that seemed more real than life itself? The kind of dream that wakes you up with your heart racing, where every detail seems so vivid that for a moment you question whether it was nothing more than a figment of your mind, And more than that, have you ever felt as if you had been saved by something that goes beyond logical explanation, something that escapes the boundaries of what we know? This sensation, this mysterious experience that stirs our deepest emotions, is what connects so many stories that span generations and cultures, forming a tapestry of tales that seem to hold a common secret, the presence of something or someone that acts silently behind the scenes of our existence. These moments, often difficult to describe, carry an impact that goes far beyond simple chance. They touch the heart of personal transformation, alter our mindset and challenge us to look within, to recognize that there are invisible forces that can guide our decisions, even when we think we are completely alone. It is as if a hidden truth whispers in the shadows of our subconscious, bringing revelations that we can only understand when we stop to listen carefully, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. Science, of course, is trying to find answers to these phenomena. Psychologists and neuroscientists investigate what happens in the brain during sleep, studying lucid dreams, the role of the subconscious, and the placebo effect, trying to decipher the extent to which our perceptions are shaped by internal mechanisms. But even in the face of impressive advances, a space of mystery remains, a void where not all enigmas fit perfectly. Why do so many different stories from people in such different contexts follow a similar pattern? The encounter with beings of light, angels, guides who bring urgent and saving messages. Why do these figures manifest themselves precisely on the threshold between sleep and wakefulness, in a state in which the mind seems to float between realities? A landmark study conducted by psychologist Carl Jung explored precisely these encounters with archetypal figures in dreams, highlighting that these symbols transcend the individual and touch a collective consciousness. Jung suggested that dreams with beings of light may be manifestations of the collective unconscious, representing a bridge between the human and the divine, a channel through which we receive guidance for our inner journey. This perspective, which unites science and spirituality, opens a fascinating path for us to understand that perhaps what we call a dream is, in fact, a window to other dimensions of reality, a dimension where the impact of our choices and the care of those who accompany us goes far beyond the visible. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this hidden truth could be the key to a much greater transformation than we can imagine. She invites us to change our mindset, to look at our daily decisions with more awareness, and to recognize that behind every challenge, there is a subtle movement that works to protect and prepare us. This journey is not just about surviving or understanding, but about opening up to what is essential, to what truly touches our soul and transforms our being. And it is precisely at this point that the stories take on even more meaning. They are accounts that reveal the behind the scenes of a life in which the invisible makes all the difference. Like the story of the mother who dreamed of an angel who warned her to check her son's room, a dream so clear and full of visual and sensory details that it seemed like a scene recorded in high definition in her mind. The soft light that enveloped the being, the calm and firm tone of the voice that spoke to her, the feeling of peace even in the face of fear. When she woke up, she did not hesitate. She went to the room and found the boy having a seizure. If she had ignored the dream, perhaps that son's life would have had a very different destiny. This experience changed forever, not only her life, but also the way she understood the world and the forces that govern it. The impact of these stories teaches us that spiritual vigilance is not just an abstract concept, but an essential practice. For those who seek to understand the depth of existence, paying attention to the small voices, to the signs that arrive when we least expect them, can be the difference between stagnation and evolution, between fear and hope. After all, perhaps we are not as alone as we imagine. While our bodies rest, while routine consumes us, there is something greater at work, something that cannot be captured only by the lens of reason, but that reveals its presence through the emotions, dreams, and intuitions that shake us up to live. Comment below. This makes sense to me, so that we know that these revelations and this search for meaning touch the hearts of many people, connecting our stories and fueling hope. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me in this very special conversation. It's truly incredible to be able to share these stories that move us, that reveal a little bit of the behind the scenes of life, and of things that we often can't explain, but feel deeply. If this content brought you any value, some reflection, that might make a difference in your journey, I invite you to continue walking with me. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these exchanges that go beyond the obvious, that talk about transformation, hidden truth, and connections that sometimes only we understand. And of course, leave a phrase in the comments that represents what you felt right now. Something like, "I'm with you until the end," or "This message was for me." Because it's great to know that we're building this conversation together. And if this video touched your heart, leave a like, because it's the best way to keep alive this connection we've created throughout this time. There's a video here that complements this subject in a way that will make even more sense to you. Click there and stay with me there. We'll continue on this journey, discovering together the mysteries and revelations that make life have a greater meaning.